Okay, well, today I want to do something a little bit different. I want to talk to you about how stories can actually influence and even encourage us to do evil. And I want to do this by talking through a recent movie that was released on Netflix. It's actually the number one movie on Netflix right now, and it's a movie called Hitman. Let me start off by saying that some people dislike stories that involve appalling evil, things like sexual immorality, murder. I can understand that. However, such stories can be powerful tools to encourage us to do what's right and fight against our own evil, selfish desires. So this is often done by having, for example, an appealing character in the story make an evil decision and then showing the audience how that decision destroys his life. A famous example of this is the story of David in the Bible, who makes the decision to commit adultery with Bathsheba and then murder her husband. But then the story goes on to show how those decisions ruined his life, ruined his family, and ruined his kingdom. So those sort of stories can actually be good moral lessons for us. Unfortunately, some stories do the opposite and actually promote, celebrate, and encourage evil instead. Now, they do this by having characters suffer no consequences for their evil, but instead enjoy various benefits from it. Benefits like pleasure, satisfaction, fame, prestige, wealth, peace, accomplishment, honor, and respect. And when a story shows that all of these wonderful things can come from committing evil, then the story is actually motivating people and encouraging them to commit those terrible things. One of the most powerful examples of this recently was 2019 movie Joker by Todd Phillips. It's the Joker movie that stars Joaquin Phoenix. And by following this exact strategy, the movie Joker communicated to the audience that murder is justified, glorified, even enjoyable, and rewarding, as long as it's committed by somebody who's been beat down, bullied, and oppressed, and they're murdering the ones who are guilty of oppressing them. Now, I was appalled when I watched the movie and wouldn't be surprised if this movie has motivated or will motivate, embolden potential teenage school shooters to take revenge on all the people at school who have hurt them. That's the type of movie it is. So in 2019, when Joker came out, I called out the makers of that movie and I chided them for being irresponsible in their storytelling. Now, the most recent movie to glorify evil like this is, as I said, Hitman on Netflix, the number one movie. It's a Netflix movie. It's the only way to watch it. And this isn't small potatoes just because it's on Netflix. Netflix is huge, and the movie was produced and directed by Richard Linklater. Now, you might not be familiar with that name, but he was on the annual Time list of the 100 most influential people in the world. So as I said, this isn't small potatoes. He's very influential. And movies are very influential because they shape how people think, especially young people. They shape how we think about life and morality. The movies build as a romantic comedy, but it actually celebrates cold-blooded murder. And the way it does this is by leading the audience to support, admire, even cheer for the main character, whose name is Gary. He's a professor of psychology and philosophy. But the audience is led to cheer for him as he and his love interest get away with 2 murders and then reap all sorts of benefits from their evil decisions, incurring no negative consequences whatsoever. So as you watch the movie, few spoilers ahead, be aware, but as you're watching the movie, you see Gary, the main character, spin a web of lies in order mostly to woo a beautiful woman. But he spins this web of lies, and through the process, he transforms himself from a nerdy professor into this confident alpha male. And even though I could sympathize with some of the choices he made, all the while, I was expecting his deception to catch up with him and for the consequences just to come pouring in, the consequences for his evil decisions, but they never do. And there were even a few scenes where I was convinced that everything was about to fall apart and he could learn from his mistakes. However, towards the end of the movie, I started to see how many minutes were left in the movie, and I started to get that sinking feeling in my stomach, beginning just to wonder if he was actually going to get away with it all, if the movie was going to play out that way. And come to find out, it did. Not only did he get away with all of his deceptions, but he covered up his lies by, at the end of the movie, committing a graphic, brutal, cold-blooded murder that's honestly difficult to watch. And then the movie ends, unbelievably, the movie ends showing how he reaps all sorts of benefits from these evil choices, including cold-blooded murder. Now, since he's a philosophy professor, throughout the film, there are scenes of him, Gary, the main character, lecturing to his philosophy class. And he affirmatively quotes a lot of philosophers in his class, philosophers such as Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most notoriously evil philosophers in history. Now, if you want to learn more about Nietzsche and how he's had a tremendous influence in Western thinking, you can check out my lecture on Friedrich Nietzsche. It's lecture 12 as part of my philosophy class. You can find that on the Convincing Proof YouTube channel or the Convincing Proof website. But it's important to understand how Nietzsche has had such an influence on Western culture. And in the movie, back to Hitman, of course, like many postmodernists, Gary tries to put a positive spin on Nietzsche's ideas, which, in my mind, is about as absurd as trying to put a positive spin on Hitler's ideas. In fact, side note here, there's pretty solid evidence that Hitler's Nazi ideas were heavily influenced by Nietzsche. You can check that out online. But regardless, after the main characters are shown enjoying the results of their murders, the results being peace, satisfaction, tranquility, a loving family they can finally have, newfound confidence, charisma, the movie winds down showing all of those benefits that came from their evil and murders. But then the movie closes with this speech Gary gives to his philosophy class. And this is important. I'm going to read the entire speech. It's a bit long, but I think it's worth it. So I'm going to quote now. Gary says to his philosophy class, "I used to believe that reality was objective, immutable, and we're all just stuck in a Plato, Descartes, Kant sort of way." A few famous philosophers. "But over the years, I've come to believe that the truth is created through the integration of different points of view, and there are no absolutes, whether moral or epistemological. Now, I find this to be a much more empowering way to go through life, this notion that if the universe isn't fixed, then neither are you. And you really can become a different and hopefully better person. Now, the one thing I know for certain is your reality will change over time in ways you can't even imagine. And I urge you to be open to this transformation. So as we close out this semester, if I have but one piece of advice for you moving forward in this complicated world, it's this. Seize the identity you want for yourself. And whoever you want to be after this class, be them with passion and abandon." End quote. So I guess if who you want to be is a cold-blooded murderer, then pursue that with passion and abandon. Seize that identity. that you want for yourself, even if it is to be a murderer. It's almost unbelievable that a movie like this can be made. Now, I will say that most culture-shifting ideas come from key thinkers and philosophers. That's how culture usually moves in its thinking. That's the philosophers, the key thinkers, they shape culture. Even though most people don't read those philosophers directly. I mean, let's be honest, philosophers can be a bit dry and boring, difficult to read at the least. So instead, what happens is that various artists who do read the philosophers, they pick up on the ideas and then communicate them to the masses through their art. And that's why storytelling art forms such as poetry, movies, songs, TV shows, literature, comic books, all those storytelling forms of art play a huge, important cultural role in influencing how people think. Unfortunately, we often don't realize how the art we consume influences our thinking because the messages through art are a bit implicit. Storytelling art doesn't give you the messages explicitly, but they come at you more implicitly as you watch the story play out, see what the characters do, and the consequences or lack thereof play out. Every piece of art communicates a message. The artists use their art to try to say something, especially with storytelling art. So we just need to be careful and consider carefully how the art that we're consuming is influencing us and the culture around us. And I must say that the movie makers here are being quite irresponsible. They're using their admittedly tremendous artistic talents to encourage and glorify evil instead of warning people of its consequences. Now, instead of watching Hitman this weekend, I've got two other movie recommendations for you. They're older movies, but they're very similar in the sense that the main characters in these two movies follow Nietzsche's ideas, Nietzsche's philosophy. They commit horrible evils, but the difference is that then they experience negative consequences for their actions, as they should. So I think these two other movies teach much better lessons. Warning though, all the movies I'm discussing in this are rated R, and all of them have very graphic scenes, so you might want to think about watching them through a filtering surface such as ClearPlay. You can check them out at clearplay.com. Not a sponsor. But the two movies I'd recommend, the first one is called Murder by Numbers. It's 2002 movie. Stars Sandra Bullock and Ryan Gosling when he was just a young teenager. But it's based on the real-life murderers Nathan Leopold Jr. and Richard Loeb, who as young people were inspired by Nietzsche's philosophy to commit the perfect murder. So I'd recommend that movie. The other one is called Irrational Man, and it came out in 2015. It's a Woody Allen movie, actually, which is interesting because he usually tries to promote existentialism through his movies. He is an existentialist. But this movie I thought was really well done. It stars Joaquin Phoenix and Emma Stone. And the story here in this movie, Irrational Man, is remarkably similar to Hitman. It's similar in the sense that the main character, played by Joaquin Phoenix, is a philosophy professor, often quotes Nietzsche and other existentialists in his philosophy class. He transforms into a stronger, more confident person by committing horrendous evils, including murder. But thankfully, this movie ends quite a bit different than Hitman. So I might want to check out those two movies this weekend instead of Hitman. And again, just be aware of how storytelling art forms are influencing us and our culture. Thanks for listening to Convincing Proof.